Hola, ¿qué tal? Estamos en Luchadoras. El día de hoy tengo el gran gusto de estar aquí con Frida Kahlo de las Guerrilla Girls y vamos a comenzar a platicar un poco más acerca de su arte. Ya hemos podido conocer un poco acerca de cómo se constituyeron.
Muy contento de estar aquí.
Frida, you began working together in 1985, reacting to an exhibition in the MoMA. Were you expecting to become a collective with this amount of work?
We never had any idea this would happen. We were just angry. We were just pissed off at the system.
And we decided we wanted to do something about it. We wanted to communicate our ideas about it. We wanted people to examine the art system
the way they examine any other area of human activity. And one thing led to another. It kept getting more and more interesting, and here we are 28 years later.
28 years.
28 years.
And what were you witnessing?
We noticed that the position of women artists was eroding in the 1980s from where it had been just 10 years before.
Yeah,
and we knew that more than half of the graduates of art schools were women. But they were getting fewer and fewer opportunities. So we started to ask the question, what happens to women artists?
Why aren't they shown in galleries? Why aren't they shown in museums? And it was very simple to do. We could just take a couple of art magazines that were so proud of their shows.
And we started to analyze the shows in another way, and we started putting up posters on the street.
First, we went after male artists who are our colleagues, who allowed their work to be shown in galleries. Each cross-section of the art world blamed someone else for the reason why. Yeah. So we decided to take them all to task. And we didn't have all the answers. We were just asking public questions. And at that time, women were not even shown in galleries. Now, 28 years later, it's a no-brainer. You can't tell the story of culture without all of the voices of the culture in the history. Women, artists of color, whatever. However, what we found is that exclusion takes a different face every generation. Now there's tokenism.
Tokenism?
Yes.
What's that?
The tokenism is the practice of institutions to choose one or two women or artists of color
To cover like
yes.
a quota.
And in a way think that everything is solved, and rather than to really show the breadth of work by women and artists of color.
And there's also extreme economic discrimination in the art world. If you look at the most successful women artists and the most successful white male artists and the most successful African American and Latino and Asian artists, the white guys make 5-6 times as much money for very similar work. And we think that until there's an equality of means of production, there isn't real equality.
So let's say that the power relations that were underlying the world of art in '85 are still prevailing, but they have taken different shapes. They are still something that concerns you.
Well, the art world is controlled by a small group of people telling us, the larger culture, what its history, visual history is. Okay. Now, the nature of that small group has changed. Now, art has become a commodity, an investment, because it is a precious object that can only exist in one place at one time, and it can be bought and sold and borrowed and bartered, and it also has become a symbol of success and a symbol of sophistication for many of the new global capitalists, who have money to burn. And we think that that's a really lousy way to tell the history of a whole culture in terms of what rich people buy. And we really think that museums, at least in the United States, are run by those people. Most of our museums are private, and they're run by trustees. And museums have not really had a very strong ethical underpinning. They allow people who give a lot of money to the museum to serve on the board and then influence the museum. And all of a sudden, it's the curators and art collectors who have more power than the artists.
How be part of the world of art as an artist and not be caught in these dynamics of
well, that's hard. That's very, very hard, and you have to really believe in an alternative, in another world, and in your own work. We've become a paradigm of that. We never expected this, but we're included in a lot of art histories and a lot of survey books. But we've never had a gallery. We've never had a dealer. We sell our work online. Anyone who has $20 can have a poster. We're happier to have all our posters on the dormitory rooms of students all over the United States than we are to have one very fancy poster hanging behind the couch of a wealthy collector. We're not rich. We're not interested in being rich. We're more interested in having a wide network of people who are interested in what we're doing. We actually empowered the ordinary person who goes to the museum. We gave them a voice, and we asked them to complain. I mean, we have become professional complainers.
And that's part of the guerrilla aesthetic and also philosophy that you have behind your work.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I was thinking one of the questions I want to ask you was how to be guerrilla inside the world of art. But I think you already said something about
Wear a mask. Wear a mask, and lots of people, protect us, and a lot of people don't care who we are anymore. Yes, we decided to be guerrillas, freedom fighters, from the very beginning. We knew we had to be anonymous because we were all artists, and we wanted to get ahead in this art world that we were complaining about, and we knew it was foolish to do that without hiding our identities. So we became anonymous. And we're freedom fighters first, guerrillas, because the art world is such a small and clubby little place. The idea that there could be secret feminist freedom fighters sneaking around all the fancy openings and dinner parties or working in the museums, spying on the establishment, was a really delicious irony. So we became guerrilla girls first, and we called ourselves girls because we really wanted feminists to sit up and take notice. I mean, we wanted to make everybody uncomfortable. We wanted to be in everyone's face so that they had to have an opinion about what we were saying. And at an early meeting, we had gotten an invitation for some photographs like you're doing now. And we knew we couldn't do that without a mask, without some kind of a disguise. So we were, what should we do? We were thinking, and artists are really bad spellers. One of our early members was misspelled guerrilla, and all of a sudden it was, it made sense. Yeah. So it was no great theoretical, examination. Yeah. It was just something that happened.
We're gonna make a little stop. And we'll be back. Vamos a hacer un pequeño corte. Estamos con Frida Kahlo de las Guerrilla Girls y Luchadoras. Regresamos. Estamos de regreso en Luchadoras. Estamos platicando con Frida Kahlo de las Guerrilla Girls y vamos a continuar ahora en inglés. Frida. But we were talking about the guerrilla mask and the guerrilla identity in general. It actually is very effective to criticize something else, which is the stereotype of how women have been stereotyped in art, but in general terms in society, how femininity is being thought and conceived. So you also try to, it works for that. So you try to oppose?
Well, actually, we wrote a book called Bitches, Bimbos, and Ball Breakers, the Guerrilla Girls Illustrated Guide to Female Stereotypes, because one day we sat around and we started to make a list. We were thinking about the stereotype of male artists and women artists. We realized that female artists couldn't behave the way male artists do. If they peed in fireplaces and, got really drunk and wrecked cars and, they would be institutionalized. So we started making lists of female stereotypes, and it was so long. And then we tried to make a list of male stereotypes. We couldn't come up with half as many. So we thought, this is a really interesting topic. Let's look at it. And society does stereotype women. And society actually stereotypes feminists a lot. And feminists have always been negatively stereotyped. At least in our history, there were, the teetotaling suffragists, and then there were the airheaded flappers, and then there were the bra-burning women's libbers, and then there were the feminazis. So society does not like women who speak up. And we want to confront, that. And this mask sort of does it. It confounds, it confounds and also supports every stereotype of women, feminists, outspoken people, animals, whatever. And I think that that's one of the reasons why it's been so successful. Plus, I cannot tell you what comes out of your mouth when you're wearing a mask. It's uncontrollable.
So beware. So you were also in that book you were writing about male state, male jail kind of paradigm. It's like this series of power roles that men have are more dominant.
Actually, in one of our examinations of the New York Times, we said it was too male, too pale, too stale, and too Yale. And that sort of said it all.
And which power places are these analysis is criticizing?
Well, we were looking at the arts coverage of the New York Times and the people who called the shots in the New York Times. But I think that more or less that applies to everything. You can see that across the board in the United States. And the sad thing is that the art world is becoming more and more an instrument of the 1%, telling the 99% what our history is. And we really think that that's a lousy way to write art history. We should not trust it. And it's time to make some alternatives and to create some alternative art worlds. There's more than the art world of big museums.
You have also talked about recover this concept of herstory against history, right?
Yes, I mean we also wrote a book. I'm plugging all our books.
You can go online.
The Guerrilla Girls' Bedside Companion to the History of Western Art, because throughout history there have been women who have figured out how to get around all the rules. I mean, many rules were set up to keep them out of making art. They weren't allowed to have studios. They weren't allowed to sign contracts. They weren't allowed to have businesses. They weren't allowed to paint from the nude. And in many cases, they weren't allowed to even learn to read or write. But in every period of art history, there were women who figured out how to get around those rules. And we wanted to tell their story. We didn't want to talk about what art history lacked. We wanted to talk about what was there and what was overlooked. And in many cases, like Angelica Kaufman or Rosa Bonheur, we're speaking of Western art here, they were artists who had tremendous careers during their lifetime, but they've been, written out or marginalized by art history. And we really thought that it was time to tell those stories, especially if 50% of, of graduating, art students are women. They need some role models. They need to know what women had to do in the past to become artists.
Yeah, and exactly that's one of the main topics. It's another effect of the dominance system that we have that also says that women are more inclined to the social science of the arts or the arts in general, and not, let's say, engineering or some other professions. But at the same time, those worlds are also dominated and controlled and impede women to participate fully.
Well, there's always a distance between the reality and the illusion, and the illusion is that the arts are something feminine. But if you look through history, art has always been about power. or about the power of empire, and men have always been, mostly white men, have been chosen to be the messengers of that. We think it's time to change. We think there are lots of art histories. There's the art history of what women have done. The art history of what is so-called minor arts. Textiles have always been in most cultures, made by women. Yeah, but somehow those art forms that are done by women are never considered high, whatever high art is. So we're against all those hierarchies of art. We think art is art, and it should all be looked at as the products of our culture. And also, we really think that having the history of art told as an Olympics of only the winners and lots of losers is not really history. That that's like a football game.
Yeah, it's a discourse of power.
Yes, absolutely.
So it doesn't mean actually that there are no women artists there, or that there hasn't been throughout life or history, but it means that they are not being seen, or their stories have not been told.
Well, I would suggest to your viewers that they go to their favorite museums and start counting. How many women artists are there? How many male artists? How many artists of color? How many indigenous artists? And then think about what that means and what the museum would be like if it really told the whole story of our culture.
And something about the guerrilla way of working means wanting to change the system, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So all your work, the posters, the activism on the streets, the talks, is directed in a way to make changes.
To make changes, and also to empower people to demand changes. Yeah, I mean, obviously, the art world is at least in the United States, is not a place where people take up arms. But it is a crucial symbol of our time and our culture, and it should be, the story that's told should be as rich as we are. I mean, as vast, not as wealthy, but as as rich and textured, very textured. The idea of a mainstream driving the history of art, that the history of art has to go only in one direction, that there's a master narrative, is really an old-fashioned idea, but I think many museums still cling to that, and certainly collectors. And allowing collectors to control what is preserved and protected and collected as art is really, it's an outrage.
You use a lot statistics. In fact, the first poster you hang out outside MoMA in New York said something like there are only less than 5% women artists, but 85% of women portrayed on art are naked or nude.
Yeah, actually, we like to call that our Get Naked poster. And it was done on the Metropolitan Museum. And we took a famous painting from art history by Ang, who's odalisque, and we put a gorilla head on her. She's a reclining nude, and then we had her ask the question, do women have to be naked to get into the Metropolitan Museum? And then we compared the number of naked females in the artwork with the number of women artists, and it was 85% of the nudes were female, but only 5% of the artists were women.
Yeah, and how that figure has changed throughout time. I mean, do you review that figure constantly? Do you have good news?
Well, it's interesting. We go back to the Met every couple of years because we hope that we've made a change. And every year it's so depressing. What has happened basically is there are more naked men in the artwork, but fewer women artists. So maybe that's progress.
Okay. Vamos a hacer un pequeño corte. Estamos en Luchadoras, platicando con Frida Kahlo de las Guerrilla Girls. Regresamos. Estamos de regreso en Luchadoras y antes que nada queremos dar un agradecimiento muy muy cariñoso a Subversiones por hacer esto posible, por ayudarnos a estar aquí con Frida el día de hoy. Estamos con Frida Kahlo de las Guerrilla Girls.
Hola.
And Frida, I want to ask you as well about one of your actions analyzing Hollywood.
Mhm.
You have several actions. One of them is the anatomically correct Oscar. Can you tell us about what's behind?
Well, we realized, I mean, we're not very methodical about what we do, and at a certain point we realized that Hollywood and the movie industry, which presents itself as being so liberal, so identified with left politics, always supporting, liberal causes. If you look at the back scenes in Hollywood, there are very few women directors, very few women cinematographers. It really is a male-dominated industry. So we thought we would take a look and see what we could, do about it. And every year, for a number of years, we were able to rent a billboard on Hollywood Boulevard, not very far from where the Oscars were given at the time of the Oscars. And it was a great opportunity. So one year, oh yeah, absolutely. And some female film directors who also had to be anonymous helped fund it for us. And one of them said, the anatomically correct Oscar. He's white, he's male, just like the guy who wins. And we redesigned the Golden Boy, the Oscar, to look like the white, middle-aged, fat, balding, very private guys. They're covering their genitals. And it was really shocking. And our whole sort of style is to make outrageous statements and then back them up with the truth. And the fact that there had never been at that point a woman given Best Director, that almost all the writing awards went to white men, and it was kind of shocking. But it was the very year that both Denzel Washington and Halle Berry both won Oscars for their performances in those years. And of course, we like to joke around and say that it's because of our,
But about the questions you were asking.
Yes, absolutely.
But I'm impressed by you saying that Hollywood may be perceived as liberal, because, I have not that view at all. Really, I think it reinforces stereotypes of beauty and roles and gender roles and power relations that are very counterproductive, in fact.
Well, I guess when I said that, I was talking about the people in Hollywood.
Okay.
The product that they create, of course, is retrograde, really retrograde. But the characters, the individuals, they all want to, be liberal. Robert Redford, Brad Pitt, George Clooney, they all want the world to perceive them as being liberal. But the products that they produce, because they produce to the marketplace, and they produce to like the marketing mentality of teenage white boys, it's quite quite different.
And at the same time, I'm thinking about the outside world of in terms of the art world. Outside the art world, like Hollywood, we also have these machineries of power or mechanisms of power, and that preservates this discrimination in general terms. And I want to ask you, what do you think are nowadays the most powerful mechanisms or arms, let's say, to produce discrimination and making it?
Well, income inequality is a big deal now in the United States, and that's controlled by the giant corporations in the financial industries. They have their own secret government that no one votes for, and that's international, and that can control many things across the world. The fact that, we buy sweatshop clothing cheaply in the United States that is produced under substandard working conditions in India and Indonesia. In Mexico, is kind of shocking, and I think that that's really that's the oppression that I feel now, and I think the discrimination is mostly economic, and I think it's going to be a push to have an American president who's a woman, but I do believe the next one might be a woman. We've had an African American, now we'll have a woman, and let's see if they can in any way change the economic situation. It's hard because it's international. It's almost larger than the government. And then they secretly fund politics, and they try to, right now they're suppressing the vote in the United States, the Koch brothers. And it's a little scary.
Do you think this is something that remains under examine? I mean, not seen, not criticized?
Well, you know, there's been this American Supreme Court decision saying that corporations are individuals. So it was used as an argument to say that corporations can give unlimited money to political candidates. Well, that's basically akin to buying an election. And now they're using that argument, intellectual freedom and freedom of speech, so that companies can refuse to give reproductive rights, health benefits to women. And so I think they're edging around the outside, and reproductive rights in the United States are really under attack.
Yeah.
It's interesting that same-sex marriage now is becoming accepted, but reproductive rights for women are being attacked. So it's a strange time. Things are not, it's almost counterintuitive how they're going. But I think everyone has to be a thoughtful, thinking person and to reject those aspects of mass culture that manipulate them and oppress them.
What do you think is the role of humor in everything, in fighting, in what you're doing, but in general terms in opposing the system?
Well, humor has always been important to the underdog. It always makes the underdog feel empowered. But what we discovered, too, is that it's transformative. It changes people's minds. And if you can make a person who disagrees with you laugh, well, you have a little hook into their brain. And, once you're in there, maybe you can change their minds. Also, it just makes people feel happy. Even if they're oppressed, you feel happy and strong at the same time.
You also have to enjoy what you're doing, your outrage, your revolution.
Yeah. But I also think, there's so many different sides to this idea of humor, is that if you look through history, periods of oppression have always produced great political humor.
Yeah. What would you say about women artists that you think they have made change in the world of art? I think maybe the performers in the 70s, or Ana Mendieta, or
Tina Modotti.
Yeah, Tina Modotti. But tell me, what are your figures, your role figures that you just admire?
Oh, well, I chose the pseudonym Frida Kahlo because at the time in the States, Frida Kahlo was not such a big name, but I loved her personality. I loved how outspoken she was, and I loved the fact that she did whatever the hell she wanted. But I think the great thing for women artists is, because the market is not with them, they have a lot of freedom to do whatever they want. They can experiment. I think a lot of white male artists are hung up on the professionalism of being an artist, and if their show doesn't sell out, they get really depressed. It's more about success for them. But for us, it's more about the truth of what we're doing. And in the larger sense, that freedom is so much more important, and maybe that's something we should be happy for.
Yeah. You have also some works where you take some sayings or quotes from male artists or key thinkers of the world, let's say Napoleon or Confucius, and you actually call it, I think, street art, because you place it on a wall, and it reveals how they also are very misogynistic.
Well, in 2009, we were asked to do a poster to commemorate the 20th anniversary of the Polytechnic massacre in Montreal. And in that year, a lone gunman went into the engineering school there, separated the women students from the male students, and said all the women who were studying engineering were feminists and they ruined his life, and he killed 14 of them. Yes. so to commemorate that, we decided instead of focusing on the tragedy of that event, we would go back and examine misogynistic hate speech against women throughout the ages. And we did a fake graffiti wall as though Napoleon had written something or Confucius had written something, all the way from Confucius, who said that 100 women were not worth a single testicle, right to Rush Limbaugh, who's one of our news commentators in the United States, saying that women's liberation was an excuse for unattractive women to get ahead in the world. Just to sort of show that things haven't changed all that much, and it's still okay and acceptable to say misogynistic things about women in public that wouldn't be tolerated if said about a lot of other groups.
Would you say and recommend our viewers to put on a gorilla mask and make something?
Sure, but rather than put on a gorilla mask, invent some other crazy identity, because the world needs more than one feminist masked adventure group.
What's the thing you enjoy the most about being a gorilla?
Oh gosh, do you have another hour?
Yeah.
I love sort of circulating around people who don't know that I'm a Guerrilla Girl and have them talk about the Guerrilla Girls, or talk about issues that the Guerrilla Girls deal with, and it's sort of like being a fly on the wall. I feel like I'm a ghost listening to things. I'm doing research. It's great. It's the best.
Good. Thank you, Frida, for being with us.
Oh, thank you so much, and viva luchadores.
Gracias. Do you agree to do a little word play?
Sure, of course.
What do you think, Frida, when I say art?
Women!
When I say men?
Difficulties.
Women?
Solidarity.
Power.
Complication.
Change.
Of course.
Revolution.
Sure.
Feminism.
Bravo.
And guerrilla.
Guerrilla. Frida.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you a lot for being with us today.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure to have you in the show.
Mucho gusto. El gusto es mío.
Gracias.
Yes.
Muchas gracias a ustedes. Gracias a Subversiones por hacer posible el día de hoy esta entrevista. Estamos con Frida Kahlo de las Guerrilla Girls. Esto fue Luchadoras.